In 1998, the music industry had quietly written Cher off, a 52-year-old woman considered a relic in a business obsessed with youth. Instead of fading into infomercials and nostalgia tours, she walked into a London studio and came out with a vocal effect nobody had ever heard used this way before. What happened next didn't just save her career, it rewired the sound of pop music for the next 25 years. The setup? Written off. By the mid-90s, Cher was in real trouble, about with what was widely reported as chronic fatigue syndrome, and Epstein-Barr virus in the early 90s had pulled her off the road for a while. To keep money coming in, she leaned into infomercials for hair care products, work that chipped away at her mystique, and made her feel less like a rock star and more like a late-night pitch woman. Her 1995 covers album, It's a Man's World, did modest business overseas but landed nowhere in the US. Her film comeback attempt, Faithful, in 1996, flopped hard at the box office, earning about $2 million, and Cher herself called it horrible and refused to promote it. Her one real bright spot during this stretch was directing and starring in a segment of HBO's If These Walls Could Talk, which became the highest-rated original movie in HBO's history at the time. But musically, the industry consensus was blunt. Cher was a heritage act, someone who used to matter. Then in January 1998, her ex-husband and former partner Sonny Bono died in a skiing accident. She spent much of that year grieving and out of the spotlight, beyond a wave of sympathetic media coverage that, if anything, only reinforced the idea that she belonged to the past. She was 52 years old, walking back into an industry that had already moved on to Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys, and teenage pop. By any normal math, that was supposed to be the end of the story. Building Believe. The song that became Believe wasn't some inspired one-take moment, it was assembled piecemeal over months. It passed through roughly 6 different songwriters, including Brian Higgins, who would later found the pop powerhouse Xenomania, before it landed with London producers Mark Taylor and Brian Rawling at their Metro production studio. Warner Music UK chairman Rob Dickens, who would later be credited as executive producer of the album, was the one who pulled the songwriting team together. When it came time to record vocals, Cher and Taylor clashed. She was a rock-leaning vocalist by instinct, uneasy in a full dance pop production. Mark hated what I was doing, and he kept saying to do it better. Cher later recalled, "We had a huge fight, and I said, well, if you want it better, get somebody else. And I walked out." She came back after seeing British singer Roachford use an unusual vocal effect on TV. Taylor told her he'd been experimenting with a pitch machine, Antares Auto-Tune, released just a year earlier in 1997, and built to do exactly one job, correct off-key vocals invisibly, so the listener never noticed a fix had happened. Taylor pushed the correction speed to an extreme setting, far faster than the software was ever designed to run. Instead of smoothly gliding between notes, Cher's voice snapped instantly from pitch to pitch, producing a glassy, robotic flutter nobody had heard on a pop record before. Cher said the whole thing came out of desperation, not some grand artistic vision, a last resort on a song that had already failed for years. When she heard it, she loved it immediately. Asked later about the label's reaction, that they said you couldn't tell it was her, she simply replied, exactly. The cover-up. Here's a detail almost nobody remembers. Producers, Taylor and Rawling, tried to hide what they'd actually used. In interviews at the time, Taylor claimed the sound came from a Digitech talker, a vocoder pedal, not autotune. It was, by his own later admission, a deliberate smokescreen to protect what they saw as their competitive edge. For months, the wider industry had no idea a piece of pitch correction software built to be invisible was actually the machine behind the biggest pop sound of the year. It wasn't until trade press, including a sound-on-sound feature in early 1999, dug into the actual session that the truth came out. The impact? Believe dropped in October 1998. It hit #1 in both the US and UK, became the best-selling single of 1999 in America, and still stands as one of the best-selling singles by a female artist in UK chart history. Cher, at 52, had her first US #1 single since 1974, a gap of nearly 25 years. She would later become the only solo artist with #1 singles across 7 consecutive decades. But the bigger story is what happened after that glassy, robotic vocal effect, nicknamed the Cher Effect, stopped being an accident and became a deliberate choice for producers everywhere. It became one of the most used, most imitated production techniques of the next 25 years, showing up in T-Pain's entire aesthetic in the 2000s, in Kanye West's 808s, and Heartbreak, and in the DNA of modern trap, hip-hop, and pop production today. A tool designed to make imperfections disappear became one of the most recognizable artistic fingerprints in music because a producer was desperate, A 52-year-old star was tired of being told she was finished, and neither of them set out to invent anything. Why this matters? Think about what almost didn't happen here. Cher was already being treated like a relic, a woman in her 50s, in an industry that discards women half her age. If Believe hadn't worked, if she'd walked away for good instead of going back into that studio, there's a real argument that autotune stays a boring, invisible studio tool for another decade, and pop music sounds completely different today. Instead, an artist everyone had written off accidentally invented one of the defining sonic textures of modern music. Not a young producer chasing trends, not a calculated label pivot, a 52-year-old woman out of options refusing to disappear quietly. That's the story people forget when they hear autotune today. It didn't start as a gimmick. It started as an act of defiance. So that's the real story behind Believe, the flop era, the studio fight, the cover-up, and the accident that changed pop music forever. Let me know in the comments. Do you think autotune as an effect has been a net positive or negative for music? And should Cher get more credit for basically inventing a whole genre of pop production by accident? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.